to The Catholic Perspective, a podcast brought to you by rcspirituality.org. Enjoy the episode.
Some straight talk about witchery, magic, and astrology.
Every Sunday at Mass, 1 billion Catholics throughout the world profess their belief in God, the creator of heaven and earth, of all things visible and invisible. What exactly do they mean by that last word, invisible? St. Paul gives us a clue at the end of his letter to the Ephesians, where he writes, quote, "Put on the full armor of God, so as to be able to resist the devil's tactics. For it is not against human enemies that we have to struggle, but against the principalities and the ruling forces who are masters of the darkness in this world, the spirits of evil in the heavens." End quote. St. Peter issues a similar warning in his first letter, quote, "Stay sober and alert. Your opponent, the devil, is prowling like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour. Resist him, solid in your faith." End quote. Clearly, there's something going on here that doesn't meet the eye. There are forces at work in the universe that don't fit into test tubes or eat 3 meals a day. These are generally referred to as occult or hidden powers, and they fall into 2 categories, angelic and diabolical. The Catechism points out that the existence of the spiritual non-corporeal beings that sacred scripture usually calls angels is a truth of faith. These angels are God's servants and messengers. They are immensely powerful. The Catechism describes them as purely spiritual creatures with intelligence and will. They are personal and immortal creatures, surpassing in perfection all visible creatures. Not only that, but they are involved in our lives. Quoting the Catechism again, "From its beginning until death, human life is surrounded by their watchful care and intercession." And that care is more than generic police action. St. Basil the Great, the 4th century doctor of the Church, puts it nicely when he writes that, quote, "Beside each believer stands an angel as protector and shepherd, leading him to life." End quote. Catholics thank God for this special protection every October 2nd, when they celebrate the Feast of the Guardian Angels. But the angels don't have an easy job. They have enemies, the fallen angels, the most famous of whom is Satan, which means adversary, also known as the devil. He and other demons were created as good angels, but they rebelled against God. The origin and nature of their rebellion remains a favorite topic for speculative theologians, but all we know for sure is that as a result of their rebellion, they have become irredeemably evil, and they act in the world out of hatred for God and His kingdom, as the Catechism puts it. This action, the Catechism goes on to explain, may cause grave injuries of a spiritual nature and, indirectly, even of a physical nature, to each man and to society. In other words, because the devil hates God, he wants to spread his rebellion against God, which he tries to do by tempting human beings to abuse their freedom, to sin. For some reason, this action is permitted by divine providence. In fact, the devil even tempted Jesus himself more than once. And what is at the heart of every temptation? The same deceitful, seductive invitation that was at the heart of the very first temptation, when the devil promised Adam and Eve that eating the forbidden fruit would make them like gods. That is, indeed, tempting. Who wouldn't want that kind of divine power and control? To know everything that can be known, to dominate situations, the forces of nature, and even other people. To get whatever you want. Tempting indeed. Very tempting. And yet, it's a lie. Satan's power is great, but it's not infinite. And even what power he wields is circumscribed by God and the good angels. He can promise a lot, and he can deliver on some of those promises, but he can't make anyone truly happy, which, after all, is what everybody is looking for. Of course, he knows this, and he tries to use it to his advantage. He doesn't promise everything all at once. He starts out with little promises that he can make come true, but he demands things for them. He makes deals. Like when he took Jesus up onto the top of a high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and promised to hand them over if only Jesus would bow down and worship him, would pledge loyalty to him instead of to God. That, ultimately, is what he's always looking for, to turn souls away from the Creator by enslaving them to some kind of created reality, whether it be power or pleasure or wealth or fame or whatever. The devil's temptations come in various forms. Invitations to little acts of selfishness or arrogance or self-indulgence are a favorite ploy, since they seem so innocent. But they can come in more glamorous ways too, like witchery, magic, and astrology, baby steps towards the dark path of Satanism and false religion. Oftentimes these kinds of practices too seem innocent enough, almost like games. And yet, the taste they give of power and control can and does serve as a conduit for less innocent activities, and sometimes even for the weakening of faith and the loss of friendship with Christ. That's why these practices really are temptations, invitations to sin, to join the devil's rebellion against God, our Father. Like every temptation, they offer a fascinating and sophisticated facade, but underneath, they are nothing but emptiness and self-destruction. The Catechism lists these activities as sins against the first commandment, "You shall have no other gods before me." Divination, trying to see the future through occult forces, along with magic and sorcery, trying to influence one's own or someone else's future through occult forces, contradict the honor, respect, and trust that we owe to God alone. They also conceal an inordinate desire for power over time, history, and in the last analysis, other human beings. And more often than not, they also involve a wish to conciliate hidden powers, the first step towards explicit idolatry, which is always some form of Satan worship. You all know the famous story of Aladdin's lamp. Inside the lamp is a genie, a spirit being, who has the power to grant 3 wishes. In the fables, these wishes almost always somehow turn against the person making them. What's the difference between wishes made to a genie and a prayer made to the one true God? The former is not protected by God's wisdom, while the latter is. We don't always know what's best for us, but God does. When we try to prescribe our own happiness apart from God, which is at the heart of all occult practices, we will always make a mess of things. Just like the prodigal son who took his inheritance and squandered it in a distant land only to end up feeding pigs for a living. It would have been better if he had talked over his frustrations with his father and asked for advice. The same goes for us. Wicca, neo-paganism, New Age, white and black magic, Spiritism, the Church of Satan, Theosophy, transcendental meditation, and other accepted and publicly respectable occult activities are certainly not strangers to college campuses. Some of them, like Women Church, have chapters operating under the auspices of Catholicism. And more institutions of higher education are beginning to offer classes for credit in witchcraft or other occult practices. Even Christians innocently dip into occult games and wear pretty jewelry that incorporates pagan or satanic symbols, like the pentagram, the enneagram, or special crystals. Satanic music is commonly heard echoing down the corridors of college dormitories. These phenomena are nothing new. They don't indicate an extra special satanic attack or the imminence of the final eschatological battle. They don't deserve extra attention, and they shouldn't throw faithful Catholics into obsessions or panics. We already know that the devil exists and that he recognizes how vulnerable some people are to these kind of intriguing, spooky, and scintillatingly glamorous forms of temptation. Far from being shocked or afraid or paranoid, the faithful Catholic simply needs to be reminded that the occult is, has been, and always will be one of the battlefields where the Church goes forth under the banner of Christ to wield the weapons of grace. You need to wield them for yourself and for others. First, for yourself. Don't be naive. Don't think that you can safely experiment with the occult, toying with horoscopes and enneagrams and superstitious healings, and tarot cards and Ouija boards and the like, without being affected by them. As one expert puts it, dabbling leads to more dabbling. The spirit world is real, and any kind of dabbling in the spirit world opens you up to it. John Gibson is a case in point. He started dabbling in the occult in college. His friends got him interested in tarot cards. Then he began exploring Wicca and other pagan religions online. He spent the next 5 years building an internet forum for these religions and ended up serving as chairman of the Pagan Leadership Conference. Eventually, a powerful conversion experience led him to the Catholic Church. This Wiccan-turned-Catholic sums up the lure of the occult like this, quote, "The more deeply you get involved, the more enticing it becomes. The inherent danger of magical addiction is that the more power you raise, the more intoxicated you get. You start gathering more and more power for yourself, and it takes over your life." End quote. So the first place you need to do battle is your own life. You need to live deeply the rich and luscious spirituality of the Catholic Church. You really need to learn how to pray. You need to study the spiritual life, the lives of the saints, the meaning of Catholic liturgy, art, doctrine, and history. Only an authentic life of prayer and a demanding life of virtue can open the heart to an ongoing, ever-deepening friendship with the Holy Spirit, the true guide and counselor. If you skimp on those, your enthusiasm for the things of God and your trust in Him will wither, and you will leave yourself open to temptation in its many seductive forms, maybe even the occult ones. But it shouldn't stop with yourself. If people are being drawn to the occult, which they are, it is only because they are thirsty for real meaning and joy. Their dissatisfaction with life and what the world has to offer sends them searching for something transcendent. That search is healthy, and it's meant to lead them to God, to the kingdom of Christ, the only source of true happiness and fulfillment. And you, as a confirmed Catholic, have been given the special grace of strength and courage to help lead these searchers into the kingdom, where they can find the solid truth of forgiveness and the transforming power of grace that flows through Christ's holy and apostolic church. Christians are called not only to be docile to the promptings of God's providence in their own lives, but to take the initiative as instruments of providence in the lives of others. That is exactly what the devil doesn't want you to do, because he knows that his false promises and fleeting joys can't compare to the real thing. And if you lead others to Christ's clear, flowing fountain of grace and truth, they will quickly abandon the murky waters of the occult. We believe in God, creator of heaven and earth, of all things, visible and invisible. Indeed we do. And for that reason, we don't dabble where we shouldn't, and we gladly lead others to dabble where they should. And that's some straight talk about witchery, magic, and astrology.
You have been listening to The Catholic Perspective, a resource from rcspirituality.org. Please visit our website and check out more great resources to help you pray, learn, grow, and go. Please join our team of digital missionaries by subscribing at rcspirituality.org.